Hey, I'm John Parks, and you're listening to the Head Smack Podcast.
You are listening to conversations with misfits, mavericks, and trailblazers.
Hey, welcome to the Head Smack Podcast. My name is Paul Pavoni, and I am excited to have another misfit with me. I have John Parks with me, and he is the Chief Traffic Architect at Prime Mover. And for more than 10 years now, John has been a coach and stage presenter to tens of thousands of marketers looking to dramatically increase their traffic, conversions, sales, and their sales online. With over $150 million worth of ad spend, John knows his way around ad campaigns like the back of his hand. Whether it's optimizing things on the campaign, audience, or ad creative level, John is the man with the skills, strategy, and expertise and experience to generate world-class results. At his core, John is a man who loves God, country, and family, and John has an amazing wife and 6 kids. John, welcome.
Thanks, Paul. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited about this conversation. I know you're going to have a lot of value to share for those that are looking at building their business and looking at their marketing chains and how to make it more effective, and all about meta ads and all the fun stuff that we might get into. I don't know whether we'll get to go into all of it, but certainly we will provide a lot of value. And so,
Awesome.
John, so tell me a little bit about yourself. I like to start the podcast with just understanding a little bit about your backstory, a little bit about your origin story. And so tell me about young John, and you can go as far back as you want.
All right.
That's
This will be fun.
relevant.
Yeah.
But tell me a little bit about the origin story of John.
Oh, man. I've been entrepreneurial since as far as I can remember. Right back, doing lemonade stands and shaved ice and walking around my neighborhood as a kid with a wagon full of treats, selling it to the other kids in the neighborhood. So
Where did
I've
that
just
come
always,
from? Where did that like most
yeah,
kids don't grow up that way. So where
right.
did
Yeah. I probably have to attribute it to my father, who was always studying entrepreneurship. As we would drive around town, he would be listening to talk shows before there were podcasts on the topic, or even cassette tapes,
Yeah.
that people would have produced based on the concept of entrepreneurship, or building your own business, or sales, or all these things. And so I think he just kind of built it into me from a young
Yeah.
age.
Yeah. And so you started with the lemonade stands, you started with those things. What
Yeah,
was next?
we had a great stand. We found the perfect location. It's all about location, right? And
Right.
we started thinking through the things, and really making sure we got the audience right, the product right, and we'd adjust things. We even had what Russell Brunson now calls irresistible offers. We were building irresistible offers. We had prices scaling, and then if you got to a certain point, then you got some free candy, and it was great. We learned all
Wow.
kinds of good
Upsells
stuff.
and all of it. Wow.
We really did. Yeah, it was really interesting. It wasn't just your typical neighborhood lemonade stand, but I've always been that way. And then what kind of launched me into my adult entrepreneurship realm was real estate. 2006, 2007, got involved with some different real estate investors who were basically teaching how to do it without money. And I was just a college kid, and I was like, okay, I guess you can do it without money. And so I started to do their methods, and we got involved with a bunch of properties, and it was working until it didn't work in 2008, when everything just
Oh,
crashed, right? And
right.
that didn't work at that point. But that's part of entrepreneurship, is that cycling, you
Right.
cycle, and you find that bottom again, but then the next bottom isn't quite as low, and you cycle like that.
Right.
And it's an important journey that business builders and entrepreneurs go on. But let's see. So there I was, kind of at the bottom of that real estate slump, and I came across Russell Brunson, who happens to be my wife's cousin. Met him at
Wow.
at a family reunion. We'd been married for a year, and we were headed up to the lake, and to meet the family, the extended family. And she's telling me about this aunt and this uncle, and this this is who this is, and this is who that you're going to meet over here, and I've got this cousin who's kind of entrepreneurial like you, and his name's Russell, and then this is, didn't skip a beat with it. And then find myself really connecting with him, and he's like, you know what, just come and work for me once you're done with college in a few months. And so I did.
What version of Russell was that?
Oh wow, pre ClickFunnels, pre author. He hadn't even written a book yet. Yeah, he was just releasing info products under the brand .com Secrets.
Wow. And so what made you
Yeah.
say yes?
Well, so, I mean, part of it because I was at the bottom of my cycle, and usually when you're at the bottom of your cycle, you're looking for someone to help lift you up onto another
Right,
step. You
right.
know what I mean? You need to get out of the slump, and so it fit that bill. I seemed to get along with the guy great. I liked what he was doing and was quite interested in learning his version of entrepreneurship. The real estate investing thing hadn't worked for me, and
Right, right.
I know it was a timing thing. It works for lots of people, but I needed a new path at that time. So
Yeah. And so what were you doing at that point for him?
I started, I guess you would call it, be a project manager. I started just manage, the a project of let's see, building a network marketing leg that he was a part of.
Yeah.
And it was send out cards. Send out cards is a network marketing program that's been around for I don't know, a couple decades now. I actually haven't looked into it in the last couple of years if it's still going or not. But it was literally greeting cards, and you could use it for marketing, or you could use it for holidays, or keeping in touch, or making people feel good, or all kinds of purposes of a greeting card, right? But it was literally an automated greeting card system. You could even build, like us marketers like to do. We could build up follow up campaigns and
Right, right,
sequences
right.
like that. So direct mail in essence with greeting cards, which rarely get thrown away. People open, if it looks like a card, a birthday card, a Christmas card,
Yeah,
they're going to
yeah,
open it. They're going to read it.
yeah.
And so it had a great open rate, really customizable. So it was a fun thing. And I was the project manager there, just kind of growing his pool of influence in that network marketing company, and did great. And so then he had me started managing this other company and this other project and this other project. And pretty soon I was managing most of what he was doing, and then
Yeah,
became
yeah.
a partner. So I'm an equity partner in Russell's Ventures now. So
Yeah, yeah. So, in that first endeavor post, the 2008, crash, was that going well from the get-go, or was it like barely making it? And at what point did you think this is really going to be something?
yeah, with the real estate before the crash.
No, no, no. With joining Russell in his
Oh
adventures, because
yeah,
at that point, he wasn't, Russell Brunson,
right. Yeah,
So
no, and that's really interesting that you brought that up because like right out of the gate, we were doing cool things and finding success, and it was awesome. And then Russell had his crash, and he's talked about that quite a bit. Where literally he had to let everybody go. Like it was because the merchanting, the people who take the credit cards, all of a sudden said no, internet marketers
oh
allowed right
wow,
now, right? And so it was just a bloodbath across the industry, and that day's forever memorialized in the OG internet marketing world. That and yeah, it was just wild. And so like everybody lost all of their revenue and subsequently all of their businesses and stuff like that. And it was only a few who could figure out how to get through that gauntlet, and Russell figured it out, and we continued on. So let's say, we really started to hit our stride a few years after that. I'm not even sure if I'll get the dates right, but 2012,
yeah,
2013, really.
yeah.
And we came up with this concept of ClickFunnels, and he has his whole story around that. And it's just been a wild ride since then.
Yeah. So was when ClickFunnels became a thing when you felt that this was kind of going to continue, or was it always on a steady climb? I mean, was there ever a point where you're like, I'm not sure if this is going to, if this is working out, or if this is,
Oh, for sure. There was points like that. I
yeah,
mean, yeah, it's just the business itself has gone through cycles. There was actually a point where Russell fired me just because of lack of revenue and ability to pay it. I'm just like, okay, I'll go my own, do my own
yeah,
thing. And I was always kind of with Russell been an intrapreneur is what they call it, right? An entrepreneur within an organization,
yeah, yeah,
which is an interesting thing. I teach an entrepreneurial class to the local high school, and I teach them like you can be an entrepreneur or an intrapreneur, and they're both entrepreneurs. Just one,
yeah.
one's doing it this way, one's doing it that, and it's an
Right.
interesting concept. The always been an entrepreneur, and there's a point where it's just like, hey, there's no money left, so can't pay anybody anything, so bye. You know, and then
Yeah.
within 48 hours, I need you back. It's one of those funny things, right?
The project manager is a pretty key role in
Right,
scaling, right? And so
right,
so yeah, when he realized that things weren't getting done, and
Mhm.
the to-do list was getting longer, you probably realized, yeah, that
And
was
the and
not a role to purge.
right, and there's an interesting point, Paul, when oh man, I should have all these dates better, but like after that really, really low point, you know, where we were trying to scale and grow and get more traffic, right? And we realized, I remember the day exactly. Russell, he kind of put his hands down on his desk and stood up so his head was above his monitor, which was looking out towards the three of us that still worked with him. And he said, "You know what we don't do? We're not running any advertising. We're not doing any ads. We're doing partnerships and JVs and affiliate things and even solo ads, which is where you exchange email lists and properly and things like that. And the one thing we weren't doing is advertising. And social media advertising was actually super new at that time,
Right, right.
if that dates me. And people are doing this thing, running ads on Facebook.
Yeah.
We should try this.
Yeah.
And so he's like, which of you three that are working in this 4-person company wants to take that on? And I'm like, that sounds fascinating. I'll totally
Yeah.
jump into that. And since then, really early on in the early days of social media marketing, I became the traffic guy, and that's what I've been ever since.
So do you think that was the tipping point for ClickFunnels when you started doing the paid ads? Or do you feel that came
Yeah, for
earlier or
sure.
later?
Yes, it was about the launch of ClickFunnels. If I have my ducks right, about at that time I started running ads for ClickFunnels. It wasn't the ads that was the pivot though. The big change that really, because first Russell and Todd had created ClickFunnels, and they had this great thing, and they launched it, and then they got very few sales. We got very few sales, and we're like, this is such a great thing. Why don't people want it? And we tried to sell it this way and that way and this way and that way. And that's one of the things that you have to realize, like sometimes you create exactly what the industry needs and potentially, hopefully what they want, because people buy what they want often more than what they need.
Right,
So
right.
so that's something to think
Absolutely.
about when you have an
Say that for the
offer.
people in the back. That's
Right.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Like think through your offer. Is it something that people want, or is it just what they need? And how can you reposition it so it's something that they want? Because that sells way easier. So yeah, something that we thought they would want, they definitely needed. Quick funnel building software that didn't exist back then. Building a sales funnel or even a website was weeks of
Right,
code and
right.
design, and it was a nightmare. So we figured this really quick plug and play model. So um, finally, Russell, he put together what he now calls as the perfect webinar. Just this presentation. He studied all the great presentations he could get his hands on, and the teachings, whatever, and he took from them. This is one of his geniuses, is distilling information and restructuring it and then into these beautiful frameworks.
Yeah.
And he built this perfect webinar framework, and that is what launched ClickFunnels, because all of a sudden we could explain it in a 1.5 hour webinar with a beautiful irresistible offer at the end, and that combo, I could run ads to that all day
Right,
long,
right.
fill up that webinar, hundreds of people would buy, hundreds again. All of a sudden it just took off.
So it
And then
was
once
really
you
a
get that momentum, you get that brand momentum, and you get
yeah.
the brand awareness, which doubles things.
So it really was a combination of both the ads and the webinar, right? Because
Right,
just the ads
exactly.
by themselves were sending people to a place that wasn't converting.
Right,
And then the webinar was that key ingredient that
right.
once you got their attention, you had a mechanism to convert them, right?
Yeah, exactly that. And that's an interesting thing to think about, Paul, when we've come to kind of own the concept of funnels in ClickFunnels, right? We did it on purpose with our brand, and if you think of the funnel, the shape of it is intentional, wide at the top, and then it
Right,
slowly
right.
scales. But this interesting thing I see with a lot of people's offers when they're running things online is they think they have a funnel, but the top isn't wide. It's actually kind of narrow, and so they're trying to pour traffic per se into
Yeah.
this funnel, and very little is getting in, and so the funnel structure it's not effective.
Right.
So you have to figure out where are those constraints and open up that top so it actually is a funnel. And so
Right.
it's not some wonky, Christmas ornament shape, but it's actually a funnel. And that's what was happening with that webinar, is that we
Yeah.
had a major constraint early in our funnel. People weren't interested in the offer as it was. The webinar opened up that top, and all of a sudden it became a true funnel.
Yeah. And I do remember when I started seeing those ads that you guys were posting, because I'm like, well, who's this 12-year-old and what is he trying to sell me?
Right. Right. Babyface Russell. Yeah.
Yeah, Babyface Russell. And so
Right,
I do remember
totally.
those getting my attention. I'm like, who is this kid? And
Yeah.
why does
Right.
he think he has something to teach?
Exactly. Yeah.
So going back to that funnel and mentioning the
Yeah.
narrowness of it, how is that different to the discussion of niching? Because I don't want somebody to hear that and think, well, man,
Mm,
everybody keeps telling me niche, 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 and now you're telling me I need to go
right.
broad, broad, broad. So,
Yeah. No,
so
that's a fantastic question. Okay, I'll speak to that. I'll bring you a little piece of wisdom here. This is what I learned in business school. If I learned one thing in college, and some entrepreneurs badmouth college, I really enjoyed it. But the one specific thing that I learned from in college, many other things too, was that there's only three ways to win in business. One of them is to be a price leader, but you never want to be a price leader. That's what Walmart is. That's what it's the
right,
hardest game in the world, and there's no profit in it. That's not what you want to be. A quality leader, which is an awesome thing to be because you can charge whatever you want. Difference between Walmart $20 shoes or Nike selling you shoes for $200, right? The difference is perceived quality. So you could be a quality leader and win in business. But the third is to be a niche leader, a niche leader, and that's the third way to win in business. And in fact, it's kind of the only three ways if you really want to categorize things
I love
that way.
that.
So I'm not talking about not niche. What I'm talking about is looking at the steps in your sales process. So the steps and I'm going to draw them like this, upwards and downwards like a funnel, right? The steps. And where are there constraints? Where is there a clog in the funnel? Something that's not working. And the reason why I developed this theme, this concept, is because I coach people all the time. We have consulting and coaching programs, and I'm often coaching people who are just saying, my webinar's not working. My webinar's not working. And I'm like, well, let's talk about that. What does not working mean?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I've been trying to do a webinar and this is my 10th time doing it and I have no sales on the back. Okay. So then I slowly walk them back through the steps of this entire process. And we end up finding out that it's actually the social post that they're using as their ad. That's what's not working. And so they have this constraint high up in the funnel. Right. So early on steps. So I guess another way to think of it is this analogy that many people have heard is an airplane, leaves, the ground in New York, and depending on just a few degree or a single degree of direction difference, it ends up in South Africa or in Norway, just depending on this just a slight degree. And so the early steps in your funnel amplify greatly down the funnel. Okay.
Wow.
So that's what I mean by a constraint, right? So I teach people to look at the very, very beginning of the funnel. That what's the very instant where somebody begins interacting with you or your brand. It's that social post. It's that moment where, it's that podcast episode. It's something that's out there interacting with them. Okay, well, what can we learn from this? Is there constraints here? Is this performing as high as it could be? Is there, of the last 10 social posts I did, is there one that stands out? Why did that stand out? How can I lean into that a little more? So when that comes down to advertising, which is kind of my specialty, if you had 10 different posts that are ads, and one of them is performing, gets twice as many clicks as the other for your money, then the one that gets twice as many clicks, you can see how that would amplify. You get then twice as many leads and sales and the whole way down the funnel.
Right.
Where instead, so so some people really fail to put much effort into testing the ads. They think they have an ad that's good enough. Well, is it good enough?
Right.
Do you realize how much that amplifies the success of your business the whole way down?
Right. And getting that data and using that data then to make better decisions. So is that the first thing that you begin looking at when you're talking about the funnel or the marketing chain, as you've mentioned? Is that the first thing you look at is the advertising, or is there something else that you kind of go even further back than that?
Yeah, so I mean, it is kind of a chicken and the egg, as they say. You do obviously have to have a compelling landing page and sales funnel or whatever for any of it to work.
Yeah.
But assuming that there's something there and it's somewhat working, yes, I do. I begin with the moment that the customer starts to interact with you, the ad. Um, and there's metrics that I have there. What are you paying for an impression? Are you within this acceptable threshold, or are you outside of it? If so, then we can look at the next step, you know? Okay, the next step, what's the click-through rate? Because that's what you ultimately want to do, is to take people from your ad and have them click through and get to the destination, the
Right.
landing page. Because if
Right.
they're not getting there, then why are you in business, right? So,
Right. Right.
all right, so that click-through rate, is the rate good? Is it? We like to see, from Meta ads specifically in our industry, we like to see 1.5% click-through rate or better. If
Yeah.
it's somewhere between 1 and 1.5%, mediocre, above 1.5, that's good. Below 1%, you can do better. Let's try
Yeah.
again, right?
And for most people, hearing that number is probably a sigh of relief because
Mm-hmm.
because they probably imagine it's got to to be successful, it's got to be way higher than that. But is
Interesting.
like 1.5, is that like, and that's like really good, or that's like the beginning of good? Obviously, if you, I guess 50%, 100% is way better. But is that pretty much the
Uh,
average that you've seen for
oh
a
yeah, no
sign of
one's getting
success?
above. Exactly. Yeah, 1.5% is good enough for you to begin focusing on the next step. Because you could
Wow.
focus there forever and try to, you know what I mean? And that's another problem
Yeah.
you can do,
Yeah.
is you can have this perfectionism thing and never go through the funnel to make sure that and it's probably better that you go through in waves, Paul. That's what we do. Is the ad within acceptable thresholds? Great. Next, is the landing page within acceptable threshold? No, it's not. Let's fix that. Because if they can't get through that initial lead capture page, they'll never see the sales page, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so we fix that. I mean, right now we have a funnel where we've identified that is the step that needs improvement. And so if we don't improve that, we'll never see the sales on the back. So
Yeah, I love that. And I think for somebody hearing that, if they're keeping track, that understanding that once you have that metric at that place, move on,
mm-hmm,
and don't
mm-hmm,
spend yourself in this endless cycle. I want to get it to 2. I want to get it to 3. I want to get it,
mm-hmm.
because you can end up focusing and spending a lot of time in the wrong areas and distracted from moving to the next step. So I think for somebody that just heard that, for them that was quite a head smack. That was
Awesome.
quite a moment for them to realize that
Yeah.
for a company that is doing as well as ClickFunnels is, for you guys to believe that. I think somebody needs to pay attention to that. So what about organic traffic? What are your feelings on organic traffic? Is that worthwhile? Why would somebody want to do that when you can get the results of paid? Like, is there, where on the spectrum of things to do for a business does that lie, and why what's the value of it in that context?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. Okay, so I'm going to bring up some phrases that we've developed here at ClickFunnels. So we have the traffic, organic, that you talk about, and we actually label that "earn your way in." And then we have the paid advertising, and we've labeled that "buy your way in." Okay, so you can either earn your way in or buy your way in. One
Nice,
is one's
nice.
sweat equity, one's all the work. You know,
Yeah,
building out podcasts, collaborating with people. Whatever it takes to build that organic traffic. Thinking of the next post and the next content creation, blogging, all those things. Lots of work, right?
yeah.
Um, and it's work, and it's a long runway, and it's slow at first, and then you hope it picks up. But what if it
Right,
doesn't, right? It's
right, right,
also
right.
possible that it doesn't.
Yeah,
Then there's the buy your way in, which is immediate traffic right now. You just have to pay for it, which means that
right.
your average order value and your revenues have to be in a better place than they
Yeah,
would if you were just getting free traffic. So it's this interesting dichotomy between the two. Um, Doing both simultaneously, I think, is a very good idea.
right, right.
I saw this stat the other day that 85% of small businesses, brands, individuals who try to build significant organic traffic, 85% of them never make it to a significant point. So
Wow.
you have a 15% chance of that working. Okay.
Yeah.
So I would never put all my eggs in that basket.
Yeah. Well, and I would
With
imagine.
advertising, yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, no, no. I'll let you
Oh,
finish your
I was
thought.
just gonna say, I was just gonna contrast that with the advertising side. With the advertising, we call it buy your way in, but we also call it traffic you control, right?
Yeah.
Because you
Yeah.
can turn it on or off immediately. $500 in today, and assuming you've got a decent ad, you immediately have traffic. So it costs, but you're in control.
Well, and the other thing that just came to mind when you were talking about that too is with doing organic, if you don't have money, you have time, and
Right.
that's, I guess, that could work. But the one thing that you don't, the data that you don't get is your offer any good? Is your funnel any good? Is any of that any good? Because you're not getting the traffic to give you the information, right? And whereas with paid, you can get the information a lot faster and say, well, man, they did good at this point, but at this point they failed. And you don't get that information as fast when you're doing organic. And so you might have a flaw in your funnel or your marketing chain down the road, but you never understand that or know it or recognize it because you're not getting enough data to make that evaluation, right?
Yeah, a really good point. And also the other thing with the advertising, obviously I'm biased because that's my gig, but the advertising is the other benefit there is it forces you to be better
Yeah.
because you're taking colder traffic and trying to get them to click and react on your page immediately. And so it requires a better setup. You can actually get away with organic traffic. You can kind of get away with a mediocre offer and sales funnel and webinar because you spent much time with these people on social media, on your YouTube channel, on your Instagram, on your podcast. And so they're very warm to you and there's this innate base foundation of trust. And so no matter what you're offering or saying, if they like you, they'll be interested in it in an unnaturally inflated way.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, since we're talking about ads, do you have any kind of a formula or anything that you look at that makes an effective ad? Because, somebody might say, okay, well, I've been doing organic. You've convinced me I need to do paid ads. And they start putting money into paid ads, but then they still fail.
Right.
What would you tell them to look for or to consider when even creating a paid ad that'll make it more effective?
Okay, great question. I think one thing to keep in mind, and this is a marketer's adage that's been around, a confused mind always says no. So make sure that your post is very clear as to what value you're providing. What's in it for me is another thing to think about. So be very clear on a single what's in it for me proposal.
Wow. Yeah.
Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
because some people are like, well, I don't know, you could get this and this benefit and this thing, and I don't know, they kind of ramble on, and I'm really actually not quite clear on what you're even offering by the time the ad's over, and I'm not going to click through it. I'm not interested, right?
Yeah, I noticed you were very selective with each one of those words that you just said, because I think they all matter. And so say that again and then continue your thought.
Yeah. Okay. So a confused mind always says no. So remember that. And so when you're trying to teach them a single thing, that benefits them. So what's in it for me? WWFM. What's in it for me? Right.
Yeah.
Is another marketing phrase that's been around for decades. But thinking about those two things in conjunction. So what's the one thing that's in it for them that I want to convey in this ad? And how clearly can I convey it?
Yeah. Yeah, that's so good. And so they've done that. Obviously creative is important. And so they've got attention, they've focused on the one thing, the what's in it for me, why should I care, whole thing. What's the next step that you start looking at in that marketing chain, in that funnel, now that you've got the vehicle to get attention? What's the next thing that you start looking at that needs to be in place?
Yeah, good question. So if we kind of think through, I mean, in a lot of these instances, as we go down this funnel or chain, we can zoom in on certain parts of it and see more things. You know what I mean? So like we might be thinking about the landing page and the conversion rate just isn't working there. Well, you can zoom in on that, and there's a funnel inside of a funnel there. What's confusing is there's the headline itself. If I switch that out, is that going to affect things? There's the call to action section. There's the layout of the page. Is the call to action that you're asking them to do, the button, it's usually a button click or a field to fill out. Is that high enough on the page? Is it above the fold is what we try to say, or at least close to it.
Or above the scroll, which is kind of the new.
Right, above the scroll is the digital way of being above the fold, right?
Yeah.
The fold referencing the old newspapers. And so those kind of things. But when you zoom into these sections, there's ways in which you can really hyper focus and figure out the pieces. On the video side, to kind of add another layer to what we just talked about, one thing you want when you zoom in there, one thing you want to make sure you focus on is the hook, is what we call it. The hook is the very beginning of the video. It's typically the first 3 to 5 seconds, and the hook can be visual or audio or copy or both.
Right. Or both, yeah.
So one hook that was effective for a while, I mean, visually, literally just kind of put your hand in front of the camera and pull it away, because it creates a visual explosion. It creates it creates motion, and we're drawn to it, right?
Right.
And another hook can be you like looking kind of adamant that you need their attention, like stop scrolling, like listen to this video. Some people will use a graphical hook or colors can be a hook.
Right.
A picture, hypersaturate it, and now it stands out artificially. And it starts out in a surprising way, or flip it around. Make it sepia or black and white, and all of a sudden it looks like it has historical value, or there's a reason why I shouldn't pass this up. It has a museum quality to it. And so both of those are different than the typical. So you get to figure out a visual hook.
Yeah. And so that's through, you mentioned video. Is that something that you recommend that most people have on that landing page, that people come to from the ad or whatever it might be? Have you found success in doing that, and that is a critical part of it, or is that just the suggested part, or how valuable would the video be for what you're talking about?
Oh yeah, great question. Okay, so who we tend to consult with and coach over here at ClickFunnels is small to medium-sized businesses. Usually they have an attractive character, a personality that is going to be presenting or hosting a challenge or presenting a webinar, or kind of the face in front of it all, right? Coca-Cola has since moved way on from any kind of personality, and now they're just an iconic brand, right? So that's not who our target market is, right? But for the typical small to medium-sized business, it's often an icon. An attractive character is what we call it. So yes, the attractive character makes the business building and growth and traffic so much easier. It is so helpful to have that involved. There are some brands that grow just based on a logo, but it's much more difficult for people to get emotional or attached to the brand. And so that being said, if there is an attractive character involved, and I'm going to say you have 2 initial exposures to these people, one is the ad and one is the landing page. Okay. So at least on one of them, you need video, because you need to build a rapport. And so I've seen both of these models be very effective, and they could both work great. Where the ad is a video, a couple minutes long, and you're able to first hook them, and then clearly describe what's in it for them, and a story, an epiphany works well. An origin story where it's like I was here and now I'm there, and I described my journey to you in 90 seconds or less. And since you kind of went on the journey with me, you now kind of trust me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm helping you understand the one reason why you should believe that I can help you get here. That's, you build that trust in the video, and then you click through, and then you hit a landing page where it's just an image and an opt-in form that you're registering for my webinar or whatever it is. That's very effective because they have spent some time with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or you can flip it. The ad can be an image that has a hook element to it, something visually interesting or scroll stopping. They click through, and then they hit the landing page, and on the landing page, they're greeted by you in a video where they can then again, start to build rapport in a relationship. Excuse me. And then, but if it's not in either place, I see people have a very difficult time getting that relationship to progress.
Yeah. So what do you tell the person that says, "Oh man, I don't want to be in front of the camera"? Do you tell them, "Well, your business is going to fail," or how did they get past that? Because they'll have a million excuses, some relevant,
Oh, for
some
sure.
not. How do you encourage them beyond that fear of getting in front of the camera and being that face?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. So there's a few paths you could take, right? You could um, find an attractive character, right? And you
A
could have
spokesman, yeah.
someone else, yeah, a spokesperson, right? And Mint Mobile, for example, I actually have no idea what Ryan Reynolds' relationship is with Mint Mobile, but he's obviously the spokesperson. Does
Yeah.
he own the company? I don't know, but he's very effective as the spokesperson. Um, Progressive chose Flo, that gal who's always the front of their of their
Right.
videos.
Right.
So I mean, those are bigger brands, obviously, but just as examples. So you could find a spokesperson, and a lot of times, one thing to realize in business is a lot of times it's the who, not the how, that we need to focus on. Like, Paul, if I had to do everything in the business, I'll never get the business off the ground,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But I could ask myself, well, instead of trying to learn how to do everything, I'm going to look for who can do those things,
Right.
and so being able to outsource that attractive character can be really helpful.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's one solution you have. Another solution is just you buck up and do it. And
Get
and
over it. Yeah.
I don't mean that harshly. What I mean is that, like, we're often our biggest critic,
Right.
and we think for whatever reason we aren't attractive enough or eloquent enough or whatever it is, where we have some kind of shortcoming. But the thing is that for most people that can actually be endearing, especially your target audience. You're going to appeal to a certain demographic.
Right.
And that's good, because remember, there's 3 ways to win in business. One of them's a niche. Your demographic can be your niche, right?
Yeah.
That you appeal to a very specific demographic. And so they're attracted to you, and not in any way other than like interested in interacting with you, learning more from you, doing business with you, right? So when you're an attractive character, you don't have to be a model. Heaven knows I'm not a model, but I can be an attractive character because I appeal to an audience. So, and it can be that your method of speaking, the way you explain things, whatever it is, there's something about you that makes you unique to them, and you've got a certain audience that responds to that. So leaning into that, into my confidence that you're going to do fine. Lean on John's confidence that you'll be fine. Another thing to help is I wish I had McCall Jones here. She's fantastic. If you haven't ran into her, she has this thing called charisma hacking, which I think is so neat. But she really helps people understand, I guess you'd say, authenticity, what you sound like, and that it's okay to be you. So another example is when I consult with people, I'll be on a call, a one-on-one call like we are right now, and they'll be able to speak quite clearly their benefits and their offer to me, and then I put them in front of a camera, and all of a sudden I'm like, hey, where did Paul go? This is Paul 2.0, and I don't like it. I want Paul back. You know what I mean? Yeah. So for some reason we get this like strange pseudo layer that we throw up. Drop that. However, whatever it takes, there's a bunch of tricks you could do. One is to literally make your video 20 times. By the time you're on the 18th or 19th time, you'll literally be so tired of being the fake you that you're actually the real you. So
I love that. Yeah.
That can help, right?
Well, what's interesting is if you look at the companies that have fandom, that have people that really like them, are the ones that do have a spokesman, or the ones that do have an attractive character. I was just thinking about even Apple. I used to be a fanboy of Apple, like, late 90s, early 2Ks. I was super fan of Apple because of Steve Jobs. Like when he came out and waved something in the air, you knew it was industry changing. It was going to change everybody's world. And it was,
Yeah.
everybody was about the Steve. And, you knew that stuff's going to come out fresh and something's going to come out different. And he was always out there as the face. And when he passed away, suddenly, Apple became faceless. It really didn't have a attractive character that they put out there that kept the fanboys going. And so now people are like, yeah, it's great. New iteration of a phone. Wow, bigger camera, round edges, square edges, blah, blah, blah. But the fandom doesn't seem to be there as much because it's not personal anymore. It's just a device. It's just another upgrade, whatever. And so I would imagine that that's some of the benefits that you would see from people that have put their faces out there in these videos and put, and created this content is because it does create a connection that builds more of a loyalty, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, you hit it right on the head.
That's awesome. So, all right. So, we're talked about, you've got their attention through ads, whether through video or through something static. And there's a video at some point in that marketing chain, that marketing funnel. They've come to the landing page. What are the things that you've seen when it comes to that landing page that, they've done the video? What are some other parts or what are some other chinks in that chain that don't quite work or get people to not convert?
Yeah. So let's see. So you got the ad, they click through, they hit a landing page. Is the opt-in rate, is it 30% or better? That's kind of a threshold you could think about. Are they becoming leads at that rate? Sales page, the next page where you're actually trying to sell them something initially. You could see 1, 2, even 3% conversion rates depending on your price on that page. So is that working? If it's a webinar, one big drop off is actually between registering for the webinar and then attending. They register on a Monday and then your webinar happens on a Thursday. Huge drop off between the 500 people you had register and only the 200 that showed up. How can you increase that attendance rate? Because if only, if a small number of them are showing up, then that's so many fewer who get to see the offer that you're going to offer them.
Do you have any data around, webinar signups and webinar attendance? Do you
you want to have above 25%, I'm going to say, attending.
Yeah.
You can definitely get up to 50%, but if you're in that window, then nothing's broken.
Yeah.
And then you just try to improve upon it, right? If you're below that 25% attendance rate, you're pretty low.
Yeah.
From what the rest of the industry is seeing, and so you'll want to improve that. Ways to improve it. This is really interesting. Think about the different ways and timing you can reach out to these people. You can send them an email to remind them the moment they register, but also the day before it's going to happen, and the day of it's going to happen, and maybe an hour before, and right when it begins. Those are kind of the 5 email moments that make the most sense to us. As notifications are on mobile and desktop, it's nice to see that pop right then. It is starting right now. I was deep in my email. I didn't realize, or whatever it was. Right?
Yeah.
And so that's good. Text messaging has a much higher open rate than email. So if you can collect their phone number and permission to text them, a similar cadence on the texting, the moment they register, so confirm that they're registered. The day before, hey, it's coming up. Make sure your calendar is proper for to attend. The morning of, hey, it's today. Remember, it's today. An hour before, and then the moment of the beginning of the webinar. Both in texting and email, that can really increase show up rates pretty good. The another element though that people don't think about is the pre-frame that the registration page gives to the actual event. So I'll jump into that because that has been a surprisingly important component to the effectiveness of people showing up. So we have a case study that we like to point to when we teach this. Mike and AJ, we work with them, and they had this landing page let's see if I can tell the story properly, where the headline left no curiosity. It was come to this webinar where we will teach you how to build out a funnel hub and why that's effective for your business and how it can improve your traffic. Opt in now. And okay, and so people register for the webinar, but then the day comes around and they're like, oh, I'm not sure I want to really learn about funnel hubs today. Oh, that sounds like more of a task to do than it is anything, right? And so there was no curiosity, and that curiosity element is very important when it comes to attendance rate.
Yeah.
And so instead, they changed the headline to be more curiosity based, and the attendance on the webinar, I think, tripled.
Wow.
They went from like 10% attending to 30% attending. And the curiosity, instead, it's the same webinar, it's the same content, but instead it was come to this webinar where we will show you how to do this for your business and this for your business. And you're going to want to make sure you attend because this third element here for your business, most people are getting wrong, and you give them obviously some context around it. So too vague isn't good, but you need to leave some bait out there in the water or they're not going to come.
Right.
We're these silly creatures as humans where we talk ourselves out of previous commitments all the time. And so you, as a sales, as a marketer, as a salesman, it's kind of your job to help people overcome that human weakness of backing out of commitment or shying away from change. And so that's your duty, right? As a salesperson, as a marketer. So I'm gonna, leave some, because the honest truth, Paul, is that these people were making false assumptions as to what Mike and AJ were going to teach them. They're making false assumptions.
Right.
Like,
I'm sure
I've heard it before, and so they talk themselves out of doing what's good for them because of these false assumptions. So leaving some of those loops open, these questions unanswered, helps them help themselves. And so they attend the thing that they obviously are interested in, they want, because they responded to your initial message.
Right. But you've created, like you mentioned, these loops, these curiosities that comes from understanding the audience, right? Of what are some of their pain points, what are their felt needs, what are they really looking to solve, right?
Exactly. A fascinating study in open loops is what we like to call it, not closing the loop, not resolving it completely, but leaving it slightly open, are things like soap operas. If you go back to the 90s, there's probably still soap operas around, where they might resolve last week's conflict, but in resolving last week's conflict, they've already opened two more. There's no end to the conflict, right? To the unanswered questions, to the suspense, to the conflict. So, or the Marvel cinematic universe. I see you've got some superheroes behind you on the wall there, and their ability to intrigue you with curiosity and give you such anticipation for the next level that they're going to present, the next movie next year coming out. They'll introduce it with some kind of a snippet at the end of the credits that opens a loop. The whole purpose of it is to open a loop. That's the whole concept. Right. And so that you think about that in your marketing, whether you're getting them to register for a challenge, register for a webinar, even just, click through from an ad. Where can you leave curiosity loops, open loops, just like these greats do who write these stories, and implement that kind of a layer to your marketing? It'll really ramp things up.
Yeah. Open loops, man. I tell you what, they are devastating. Like when a show gets canceled and
you almost need the writer to come in and just write a blog post and just resolve all the loops. This is what we were going to do. So.
And so, okay, so we're on the web page. We've created the curiosity. We've created the open loops. We've got them to attend the webinar. They've come to the page. One of the things that I've noticed you guys doing is pretty long pages, long. And I don't know whether that is still a thing, and what the strategy is to it. Like, because most people think, long web page, we need to keep concise and short and whatever, and not too much scrolling. What's the strategy behind a longer page when somebody comes to it?
That's a fantastic question, because we wrestle with it too, trying to find the best conversions. And sometimes we find that shortening it is one of the things that helps. But yes, we do have a tendency towards long pages. And the theory here, and it tends to play out, is the top part is very emotional on a page. And then the bottom part is for the logical buyers. Okay, so the quick action takers, they interact with your fast moving video, or with a hook story and an offer in it, and a snazzy headline, and a call to action that's going to deliver some product or register them for some webinar they're excited about, whatever it is. So that first portion, maybe the top fourth of the long form page, is all dedicated to the emotional buyer.
Wow.
And that's, we make most of our decisions, humans make most of our decisions with our emotions as much as we think we're logical. I think it was Dan Kennedy who says we buy off emotion, and then we justify it with our logic. It's an interesting pattern that we do. So the rest of the page is both for those who are trying to justify the purchase, sincerely want more information, because there are people who just it's Nicholas Kusmich who taught me this one. He says, if you go to the public pool and you're swimming laps for exercise, there's a fast lane typically, and then a medium, and then a slow lane. And the people in the fast lane, they both get to the end and back just as well as the people in the slow lane. It's just at a different pace, and both of them are effectively swimming the length of the pool. So you have to market to both of those people who make the quick decision and people who take some time to make the decision. Both of them are effective buyers and worthwhile buyers. In fact, I'd even argue those who are slower to make the decision to say join your software, who has a monthly fee, are probably also slower to cancel. And so maybe they're even a higher lifetime value of a customer. So make sure you do cater to them as well, right?
Yeah. So when it comes
to the longer form page helps that. Yeah.
So I know you guys are very much about the data. So what have you found percentage-wise between fast buyers or emotional buyers and those that take a little time? Do you have any data around that of, what percentage of people have you found that are in either category?
Yeah. If the data I would have to reference, because categorizing them like that would be a challenge for sure. But the data we do have is heat maps on the websites.
Right.
So where are people interacting with the website, clicking on the website, things like that. That emotional section, less than 75% of the people interacting with your website reach below that. 75% of them have made their decisions in that top fourth of your page.
Right. Yeah, I would
the
imagine
additional 25 will scroll down through it.
Yeah, I would imagine you could track that by having call to actions all the way down the page and seeing at what point people click on the call to action to see.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I think we have. I haven't seen that data recently, so that's a good reminder.
That's awesome. Okay, so selling online, you had mentioned the best of the best of what Russell has put together. Let's talk about that in our last few minutes here.
Oh yeah, I love that challenge. So we're running a challenge. We'd run it once a month, and typically towards the end of the month. And it's sellingonline.com, and it's a challenge where Russell's put together his, like you said, he's curated just the most effective and efficient way to get you selling online. And he talks about psychology. He brings in guest speakers, I think 8 different ones.
Wow.
He teaches you exactly what it takes to start selling online, because there's a lot of people who build websites online and put content up online, but there's so many fewer who are actually making sales online and making revenue. What does it take? How does it and a lot of the principles that we discussed today are brought up in that challenge and expounded upon and applied directly to your business. And Russell's just a fantastic teacher. He's one of the best out there when it comes to how to sell things online. And so this challenge is great. It's we decided to make the cost of the challenge really low so that we could get as much exposure in the industry as possible. So it's only $100 to come and learn from Russell for 3 days and exactly how to sell online. So yeah, it's the favorite thing we've launched in a long time.
So I know there was a time when free challenges was quite a thing. Why are you charging people for it now?
Yeah, we're charging $100 because one, we know that the content is more than worth it. Two, because we've found that those who pay attention.
Right.
And so if we ask for a little bit of money, just $100, I mean, people pay a couple $1,000s to attend a 3-day event without blinking an eye. But if we could charge even just a little bit, it still is in the category of impulse decision. Like, I just saw this thing, but yeah, I think it'll fit. I don't have to think about it a long time. I don't have to stew on it or even ask, my partner, my spouse, whatever, for a smaller purchase like that.
Right.
So it takes a lot of the, having a low price point takes a lot of the excuses away, but it also makes you feel committed. We haven't.
Right.
I'm going to say this number, hoping that it's about right. I think we have an 87 to 89% attendance rate.
Right.
Now, if it was a free challenge or a webinar, we would be 20, 25%.
Yeah.
And so we get so many more people attending because we had them commit with some money.
Yeah, I love that. And that's why I brought it up, because, we had talked about, the percentage of turnouts for webinars being so low sometimes, and from what people expect it would be, but that, if it's free, then they're not going to be as committed as if you charge a small fee for it. There's a little more commitment, there's a little more motivation to attend it, because you've paid and you've made that decision to engage with it. So as we begin to wrap this up, what's a head smack or a question that I haven't asked you that you want to talk about?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. Man, let's see, what can we think of here? Advertising on other platforms? Why am I just on Meta?
Okay,
that'd be a good question, right?
So tell me about it.
People get what I say, shiny object syndrome. They hear about LinkedIn advertising, and they hear about YouTube advertising and Google advertising, and they hear about maybe I should advertise on the TV, or or on Reddit, or all these other sources. And it's not wrong. It's not wrong to think about that, but I'll just encourage people. If you haven't gotten into the world of advertising, the easiest place to begin is Meta. You can, and some people might say, well, hey, Paul, I tried advertising. I threw up YouTube ads and then just couldn't get any return on my investment. I would really encourage people to start with Meta ads. It's the algorithm is extremely effective at finding your target audiences and your customers. The cost is lower than any other platform that I know of. So it's just like, it's the easy place to begin your journey, to learn it, to cut your teeth, as they say, and get good enough that you can then graduate yourself to other platforms.
That is awesome. Great way to end this. Man, John, this has been amazing. I know you have a hard out and we've got a little bit over time already, but I do appreciate you coming on, man. Thank you so much.
It's been my pleasure.
You are listening to Conversations with Misfits, Mavericks, and Trailblazers.